A major investigation by the New York Times and San Antonio Express News found police at schools all across Texas used force thousands of times in recent years. It includes pepper spraying students, tasing them, and taking them down and handcuffing them. Asher Lara Small is one of the reporters behind this investigation. He's joining us now with a closer look at this. Asher, thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks so much for having me, Ashley.
Talk to us about what really spurred your investigation. What made you start looking into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you know, we all know there was the tragic shooting in Uvalde in 2022. And then the next year when the legislature was in session, you know, everyone really wanted to make sure there wasn't any sort of shooting like this that would happen again. So folks rushed really quick to add safety measures to schools, and one of the key ones was adding an officer to every single campus. Now, the issue there is that there were no corresponding guardrails in terms of oversight with those officers. And so what we really wanted to understand is, like, how has that worked so far? It's a big black box, and we requested records from across the state to understand how those officers were interacting with kids.
Yeah, you know, I think it is a large jump. It's fair to say I was listening to all of the debate on those bills as it was happening, from officers saying they wanted an armed police officer to protect students to having students being taken down in handcuffs in the hallways of their, of their schools. What did you find? Tell us about some of the more, egregious things that you found digging through all of this data.
Yeah, so as you know, most of the way an officer spends their time is not, those most severe incidents when there's a gun brought to campus or a knife brought to campus. Most of what they do is they're patrolling the halls. They're looking for vapes. They're looking to, keep things in order. There is a law that says they're not supposed to get involved in routine student discipline, but what we found when we looked into the cases is that a lot of the cases started over smaller incidents, things like a student was out of dress code, or they were talking back to a teacher. They wouldn't go to the principal's office. And in some cases, those things escalated into, as you said, uses of pepper spray, uses of, officers taking students down to the ground. In some severe cases, students they used tasers on students, and in some cases it resulted in injuries to students as well.
Okay, this is very, alarming, because you pointed out something very, very important, and that is there is a law that says they cannot get involved in these routine type things that happen in a school. Where is the disconnect happening? Did you find any information, any indication?
Yeah, so there's a lot of pieces to this, of course, right? And there's different ways we could look at it, but a few things stand out. One, Texas does train officers for how they should be when they work in school. If they're going from being a street officer, for example, to an officer in a school. That covers some key topics, things like de-escalation, working with students with disabilities. That said, it's a one and done training that lasts 20 hours. The national recommendation is that the minimum be 40 hours. And there are a lot of other states that include recurring training requirements. Kentucky, which also requires an officer on every campus, requires 120 hours of training. Another piece of this is that oftentimes when an officer is being called into a situation, as you can imagine, it's the assistant principal or an educator or someone who works at the school is calling the officer in. The problem is they're not trained on when they should engage the officer. So even though there's this idea, I sat in on one of the trainings for school police officers, and the officers were told, look, you shouldn't engage unless the incident would otherwise rise to the level of a 911 call. I'll tell you, the folks in the room, they kind of scoffed because they'd been working in schools already, and they're like, it seemed like that was not how it was functioning on the ground. So there's several aspects to this.
What's the response from lawmakers hearing this, seeing this, this report?
Yeah, we're following that. There's been some initial response. Senator Royce West put out a communication, and it's something that we're really going to be tracking actively going into the next legislative session.
Yeah, something we all will be watching. Reporter Asher Lara Small with the New York Times, we thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ashley.